Hello and welcome back to the Tech Blackboard. Today is our weekend exam cram on AZ-900. We will cover 135 questions on AZ-900 that will help you to cover the new course content which Microsoft updated in May 2022. And in case you don't know about the new changes, then please watch this video appearing on your screen and the link for the same is available in the description box. And friends, for the free PDF file containing all the 135 questions with answers discussed in this video, do remember to watch the end section of this video. And for those who are joining here us for the first time today, I would like to specifically mention that besides this video covering 135 questions, we have one more video containing 191 questions on AZ-900. You can see the thumbnail of this video on the screen and the link for that is now available in the card section on the top right corner and in the description box. So friends, with these two videos, I have covered a total of 326 questions on AZ-900. And it goes without saying that for a complete course coverage, you must watch both these videos so that you are able to cover the entire length and breadth of the AZ-900 course content. Both these videos are packed with lot of exam tips, Azure concepts and real Microsoft documentation to support each answer. Even after watching these two videos, if you still have any unanswered question or remaining doubts, do let me know in the comment section. And you will surely get answers not only from the Tech Blackboard team, but also our strong viewer community will also help you to find the answers. And now you can share our videos not only on YouTube, but also on Facebook and Instagram. Do join us on the other social media platform. Details are now flashing on your screen and also available in the description box. And friends, as always, please appreciate our efforts and show your love by pressing the like button and subscribing to the channel. So let's get started with this power-packed video on AZ-900. So let's begin the part 1 of AZ-900 updated exam Q&A series. Here comes the question number 1. The question says that you have an on-premises network that contains several servers. You plan to migrate all the servers to Azure and you need to recommend a solution to ensure that some of the servers are available even if a single Azure data center goes offline for an extended period. What should you include in the recommendation? Your options are availability set, fault tolerance, scalability, elasticity, or low latency. And the correct answer for this question is option B, fault tolerance. And the reason is that fault tolerance is the ability of a system to continue to function in the event of a failure of some of its components. And we can very well see in the question that we need to recommend a solution that should keep functioning even if a single Azure data center goes offline, which means that the Azure data center fails. However, we need to bring up a solution or we need to create a solution that should still keep functioning. And that's why we have chosen fault tolerance as the answer of this question. Moving ahead with question number 2, it says that in Azure, what do you understand by application availability? Your options are application is available to high-end users. The second option is the individual SLA of each resource, or does it mean the overall time that a system is functional and working? The correct answer for this question is option C, and that means that application availability means the overall time that a system is functional and working. And here comes our question number 3. The question says that your company plans to start using Azure and will migrate all its network resources to Azure. You need to start planning process by exploring Azure. What should you create first? Should you create a subscription, or should you create a resource group, or should you create a virtual network, or should you create management group as a first step? The correct answer to this question is option A, subscription. Now friends, this is a repeat question and I have also discussed this question in our earlier series on AZ-900. However, the reason for taking this question in this series was that many of the users were really confused between subscription or management group as an answer. But let me make it very clear, the correct answer for this question is subscription. And the reason behind confusion for many users is Microsoft documentation itself. So the hierarchy given on the Microsoft documentation is management group, and inside a management group, you create a subscription, and then inside a subscription, you create resource group, and then under the resource group you create all the resources. And that's why many users are confused, because in Microsoft documentation management group comes before the subscription. So let's first understand what is a management group. So management groups provide a governance scope above subscription. However, you need to understand that management group is not mandatory component in Azure. They just help you efficiently manage access, policies, and compliance for the subscription. Now let's go to the Microsoft documentation and try to understand this in more detail. So here is the Microsoft documentation that gives a clear hierarchy that management groups comes at the top level. And under that we can see subscription, resource groups and resources. And this is exactly where the confusion pops up. Coming back to our presentation, as I was mentioning that management group definitely comes before subscription. However, you need to understand management group is just there to manage lot of subscription. For example, if you are a big organization and you have created multiple subscription to efficiently manage your resources. In this case, you will use management group to efficiently manage your policies, access or compliance. And one more time, I'm stressing on the point that management group is not mandatory to create. However, creation of subscription is absolutely mandatory. You cannot create any resource in Azure without creating subscription, because subscription is something to which your billing is attached to. And that's the reason that you must create the subscription at the very first place before you create any resources in Azure. I'm very hopeful that now you understand the difference between management group and subscription. Subscription are mandatory and you must create them. However, management group are just to facilitate you efficiently manage the resources or multiple subscription. And here comes question number 4. The question says that you plan to build an enterprise data warehouse in Azure to perform business data analysis. The requirement is to build an integrated environment that will support the development of end-to-end analytical solution. Which service should you use for this? Your options are Azure Machine Learning, Azure Synapse Analytics, or Azure Database for PostgreSQL. And the correct answer for this question is option B, Azure Synapse Analytics. By the way, do you know what was Azure Synapse Analytics formerly called as? If you know the correct answer, do let me know in the comment section. Now let me give you more details for choosing option B as an answer. Now first, looking at option number A, Azure Machine Learning, which obviously is an incorrect answer because it does not provide enterprise data warehouse services. Azure Machine Learning is a development platform for coding machine learning. And very obviously, Azure Machine Learning does not support creation of data warehouse, which is the ask of the question. Moving on with Azure Synapse Analytics, which is a correct answer. Let's read what is Azure Synapse Analytics. So Azure Synapse Analytics is a data analytic platform that combines data integration, enterprise data warehousing, and big data analytics. It is possible to build a data warehouse that can be used for BI, which is business intelligence, and machine learning by integrating the data collection, exploration, preparation, and management. It also significantly reduces the time it takes to develop your project with an integrated experience that supports the development of end-to-end analytic solution. And that's exactly what was asked in our question as well. Moving on with Azure Database for PostgreSQL, let's see what is Azure PostgreSQL. So PostgreSQL is a relational database service based on open source Postgre database engine. And as I have mentioned, it is not used to build a data warehouse. And that's why Azure Database for PostgreSQL is an incorrect option. Moving ahead with our question number 5. The question says that you are the data engineer for your company. An application uses NoSQL database to store data. The database uses key value and wide column NoSQL database type. Now developers need to access data in the database using an API. You need to determine which API to use for the database model and type. Which two APIs should you use? Mind it that you have to choose two APIs. Your options are Cassandra API, Table API, SQL API, Gremlin API, or MongoDB API. And the correct answer for this question is option A, Cassandra API, and option E, MongoDB API. And the reason is that both Cassandra API and MongoDB API has a key value pair. And that was the exact ask in the question as well. Moving ahead with question number 6, the question says that which two types of customers are eligible to use Azure Government to develop a cloud solution. Each correct answer presents a complete solution. You have to note that each correct answer or each correct selection is worth 1 point. The options given are a Canadian government contractor or a European government contractor. The third option is a United States government entity or United States government contractor. And the last option is a European government entity. And here comes our two correct options. Option C, which is United States government entity, and option D, a United States government contractor. So here is the Microsoft documentation that you can read more on Azure Government. And here you can read that Azure Government is a cloud environment specifically built to meet the compliance and security requirements of US government. Please note it's mentioned US government. Further, the documentation says that this mission critical cloud delivers breakthrough innovation to US government customers and their partners. Azure Government applies to the government at any level, from state to local government to federal agencies, including Department of Defense agencies. You can read a lot more on Azure Government on this documentation. The link is available in the description box. However, the crux of the documentation is that Azure Government relates to the US government. And that's exactly why I have chosen both the options related to US government. Moving ahead with our question number 7, you have to tell whether this statement is correct or not. Let's read the statement. The statement says a hybrid cloud is a part of public cloud. Do you think it's a correct statement or it's an incorrect statement? Let's find out. The correct answer is no. So this is not a correct statement. So what is a correct statement? Let's figure out in question number 8. So now the statement in question number 8 says that a public cloud is a part of hybrid cloud. And this time this statement is correct. So you need to understand that hybrid cloud is not a part of public cloud. However, the vice versa is true, and public cloud is definitely part of hybrid cloud. Now let me give you some more details on hybrid cloud and give its use case so that you understand hybrid cloud a little better. And here you can see that I have given a use case where you can possibly use hybrid cloud. So let's read out. And it says that your application resides on premises or in a private cloud. Many times certain spikes in demand overload the capacity of your application, like season events, like online shopping or text filing. So in these kind of business scenarios, the organization can tap into additional computing resource in public cloud, sometimes known as cloud bursting, where the hybrid cloud environment allows the on-premises infrastructure to burst through the public cloud. And friends, many customers take the advantage of hybrid cloud to achieve global scale and increased reliability. Also, in highly regulated industries, data residency requirement may mandate that certain sets of data must be kept on premises while the other workloads can reside in public cloud. So I hope this clears out when you can use hybrid cloud. So in case you want to extend your existing on-premises cloud or a private cloud, in these kind of scenarios, you can burst out to the public cloud. And this will make your cloud model as hybrid cloud because you still have your on-premises or in private cloud while you are also extending your business to public cloud. And that's why it is called a hybrid cloud. Moving ahead with question number 9, it says that you have on-premises network that contains 100 servers. You need to recommend a solution that provides additional resources to your users. The solution must minimize capital and operational expenditure cost. What should you include in the recommendation? Your options are a complete migration to the public cloud or an additional data center, or should you go for a private cloud? And the last option is hybrid cloud. So what according to you is the best cloud model that suits this business requirement? The correct answer for this question is option D, a hybrid cloud. As I explained in the very last question, question number 8, that hybrid cloud is used when you want to still continue using your private cloud or on-premises cloud, or you just want to scale out without adding any additional server to your already existing on-premises data center or the private cloud. In this case, hybrid cloud is the best suited model. Also note that in the question itself, you are given with a good hint. The question itself says that you need to recommend a solution that provides additional resources to your users. Nowhere in the question it says that you are moving entirely to the cloud model. It just says that you need some additional resources while you also maintain your on-premises network as well. So in these kind of cases where you still maintain your on-premises network and in parallel you extend your capabilities using the public cloud, this is a clear indication in question that you should go for hybrid cloud. And now here comes question number 10, and in this question you have to define availability set. You can see that we are given with three choices, and out of these three choices the correct answer is option B. So availability set is a logical grouping of virtual machines that allows Azure to understand how your application is built to provide redundancy and availability. Moving on with question number 11, the question says that your company plans to deploy an artificial intelligence solution in Azure. What should the company use to build, test, deploy predictive analytics solution? Your options are Azure Logic App, Azure Machine Learning Studio, Azure Batch, or Azure Cosmos DB. The correct answer for this question is option B, Azure Machine Learning Studio. Let's move ahead with question number 12. The question says that which Azure service should you use to correlate events from multiple resources into a centralized repository? Your options are Azure Event Hubs, Azure Analysis Services, Azure Monitor, or Azure Log Analytics. The correct answer for this question is option D, Azure Log Analytics. Moving on with question number 13, which is a yes-no kind of question. It says that your Azure environment contains multiple Azure virtual machines. You need to ensure that a virtual machine named VM1 is accessible from the internet over HTTP. The solution given is that you modify an Azure firewall. Does this meet the goal? The correct answer for this question is yes, this meets the goal. Now let me give you some more variation of the same question, as Microsoft can twist the questions or change the options or the solution given in the question. So let's see another variation. Here in question number 14, the question is exactly the same. However, this time the solution is that you modify a DDoS protection plan. Does this meet the goal? The correct answer for this question obviously is no. Moving ahead, we have question number 15, and it also gives you one more variation. However, once again, the solution is different. This time the solution says that you modify an Azure Traffic Manager profile. Does this meet the goal? And very obviously this is no again, because now we know that if you want to ensure that a virtual machine is accessible from the internet over HTTP, then in that case you have to modify Azure Firewall. In case you have more variation of the same question, do let me know in the comment section and I will include the variations in the upcoming parts. Now let's move to question number 16. The question says that which of the following correctly define edge computing? Your options are edge computing allows you to secure your application on multiple locations, or edge computing allows customers to run virtual machines, containers, and the data services at edge location. Or the third option is edge computing allows you to create scalable web application. And the correct answer for this question is option B, which says edge computing allows customers to run virtual machines, containers, and data services at edge location. And here comes our question number 17. The question says that Azure Key Vault is used to store secrets for Azure Active Directory or Azure AD user accounts. Now here you can note that some part of the question is underlined. Let me tell you what does that mean. Let's read the instruction of the question. Review the underlined text. So you have to review this underlined text, and if it makes the statement correct, then you have to select no change is needed. So here you have to select no change is needed as an answer if this underlined text makes this entire statement as correct. In case this underlined text makes this entire statement incorrect, then you have to choose the correct answer out of the other three options given. So I'm hopeful that you understood what exactly is to be done in this question. So let's see the options given. Our first option is obviously no change is needed. The second option is Azure Active Directory, Azure AD, administrative accounts. Or the third option is personally identifiable information or PII. Or the fourth option is server application. And the correct answer for this question is option D, server application. And this is the Microsoft documentation to justify our answer. The very heading of the page says that manage secrets in your server apps with Azure Key Vault. And I'm sure that I need not to read this page further. The heading itself says that we use Azure Key Vault to store or manage secrets for our server applications. And that's the reason we have chosen server application as the answer to this question. Are you liking the video so far? Are you liking the questions and answers? If yes, then please give a like to this video right away. Coming to the question number 18, the question says that from Azure Cloud Shell, you can track companies' regulatory standards and regulations such as ISO 27001. The instructions are pretty much same. You have to review the underlined text and tell whether this entire statement is correct or not. If it is correct, then you have to choose no change is needed. Otherwise, you have to choose out of these other three options. And the correct answer for this question is option D, the Trust Center. So if you have to track your company's regulatory standards and regulation, then you should use Trust Center and not Azure Cloud Shell. Coming to the question number 19, it says that the only way to use Azure resources is to purchase an Azure account before you can use them. You have to tell whether it's a true statement or whether it's a false statement. And the correct answer for this question is it's a false statement. And the reason is very simple. You can always create a free Microsoft Azure account and then you can start creating or using Azure resources. In case you don't know how to create a free Microsoft Azure account, then this is the video on your screen that you can check out. And in this video, I have shown a step-by-step process on how to create a Microsoft free Azure account in which you will get a $200 of credit which you can use to create Azure resources. Moving on, we have question number 20 and it says that Azure Active Directory can be used to grant or deny access based on the originating IP addresses. And the correct answer for this question is false. Now I'm sure that you must be wondering, if Azure Active Directory is not the service, then which is the service that you can use to grant or deny access based on the originating IP address? Let's check out the same in the question number 21. The question number 21 says the Azure Firewall can be used to grant or deny access based on the originating IP address. The correct answer for this question obviously is true. Now let's jump to question number 22. The question says that your company plans to deploy several million sensors that will upload data to Azure. You need to identify which Azure resources must be created to support the planned solution. Which two Azure resources should you identify? Each correct answer presents part of the solution and you need to note that each correct selection is worth 1 point. Your options are Azure Data Lake, Azure Queue Storage, Azure File Storage or Azure IoT Hub. And the correct answer for this question is option A, Azure Data Lake, and option D, Azure IoT Hub. Now let me give you a quick explanation for each of the option. So here I present the explanation. Looking at the first option, Azure Data Lake. So Azure Data Lake can be used to store the data from devices and sensors. And you can see that we are collecting data from millions of sensors. And that's why we have chosen Azure Data Lake as a part of solution. Coming to the Azure Queue Storage, which is a wrong answer. So Azure Queue Storage is exclusively for messages, but here we are collecting data. That's why it's not a correct option. Then we have third one as Azure File Storage. Now in case of Azure File Storage, it is a cloud storage service that is designed for sharing files, development or debugging tools, and applications that rely on native file systems. So you can see Azure File Storage is primarily related to files and native file systems. It has nothing to do with sensors. And now we come to the Azure IoT Hub. Azure IoT Hub is used for data processing. So you can see we can use Data Lake for storing the data and we can use IoT Hub for data processing. And thus these two options make a complete solution. Moving on with question number 23, it says that which Azure service you can use for quickly sending millions of notifications to iOS, Android, Windows or Kindle devices working with APN or Apple Push Notification Service or GCM, Google Cloud Messaging or WNS, Windows Push Notification Service and more. And your options are IoT Hub, Azure Notification Hubs, Azure Machine Learning or Azure Monitor. The correct answer for this question is option B, Azure Notification Hub. And in case you are looking for a deep dive on Notification Hub, then this is the Microsoft documentation. And here in the first section, which is product overview, you can very well read that it reaches all platform, iOS, Android, Windows, Kindles, and Baidu. And these are all the platforms that are mentioned in the question as well. So that makes Azure Notification Hub as a correct answer to this question. Now let's move to question number 24. The question says, to what should an application connect to retrieve security tokens? Your options are Azure Storage Account, Azure Active Directory or Azure AD. The third option is Azure Security Center, and the fourth option is Azure Key Vault. The correct answer to this question is option B, Azure Active Directory. Now in this question, I have seen many people are getting confused between Azure Key Vault and Azure Active Directory. And just to clarify that confusion, let me give you more details so that you can understand why I have chosen Azure Active Directory as a correct answer. So here comes the detail, and you can read that Azure Active Directory or Azure AD authenticates the users and provides the access token. And you need to understand, an access token is a security token that is issued by an authorization server. So security tokens is not a secret. Additionally, I want to stress that the tokens are generated when request is made, and they are generated with almost each request and are valid for a very short duration. So as I have mentioned here, there is no point in protecting the token by storing it in Azure Key Vault to use it when needed. So it's not a static value, it is generated on runtime. And that's why it doesn't make any sense to secure your access tokens in Azure Key Vault. And that's why we have chosen Azure Active Directory as a correct answer. To all my viewers, if you still have confusion between Azure Active Directory and Azure Key Vault, do let me know in the comment section and I will surely clear out all of your confusions. Moving ahead with question number 25. The question says that you need to be aware of the latest Azure security standards to protect your data. Which of the following services should you use to ensure this? Your options are Azure Government, Online Terms of Service, Trust Center, or Azure Compliance Documentation. And the correct answer for this question is option C, Trust Center. Now let me give you a little more details on all the options. So Azure Government addresses the security and compliance needs of US federal agencies, state and local governments and their solution providers. We also discussed Azure Government in quite some detail in question number 6 of this part only. So if by any chance you missed the question number 6 of this part only, then please go back in this video and watch question number 6 to understand the Azure Government in more detail. Moving on with online terms of service. So this one is an agreement between Microsoft and you. The online terms of service details the obligation of both parties regarding the processing and security of customers and personal data. Moving on with Trust Center, which is the correct answer for this question. So Trust Center implements Microsoft principle for maintaining data integrity in cloud, and Microsoft implements security, privacy, compliance, and transparency in all Microsoft cloud products and services. And you can get all the latest information about Microsoft Azure Security Center in Azure Trust Center. Moving on with Azure Compliance Document. So Azure Compliance Documents provides detailed documentation on Azure legal and regulatory standards and compliance. You can also see the reference blueprints that can be applied directly to your Azure subscription. Friends, it takes a lot of effort to gather documentation around each of the options, but I do all these efforts to make you aware about all the Azure services so you can get higher scores in certification exam, and in parallel you also mature as a cloud professional. And thus my humble request that please show your appreciation to my work by pressing the like button, subscribing to the channel, and also share these videos with everyone who is learning Azure. And if you have already liked and subscribed, a big thanks to you. Now let's take some questions on CAPEX, that is capital expenditure, and OPEX, that is operational expenditure. It's very important to understand the differences between the both, as operational expenditure or OPEX is the core essence of cloud solution, and moreover you will get many questions in AZ-900 exam where you would need to identify the differences between CAPEX and OPEX. So let's start with our first question on CAPEX and OPEX, and that's question number 26. The question says that Azure pay-as-you-go pricing is an example of CAPEX. Is it a true statement or is it a false statement? The correct answer is false. And the reason is presented here. With Azure pay-as-you-go model, you pay for the services as you use them. This is operational expenditure and not the capital expenditure, because CAPEX is where you pay for something upfront. For example, you are buying a new physical servers. However, in case of pay as you go, you use the service and you pay for them to the extent you have used them. That's why pay as you go is not CAPEX, but it is operational cost or OPEX. Moving on to the next question, number 27, we have deploying your own data center is an example of CAPEX. Is it true or is it false? The correct answer is true. The reason is that deploying your own data center is an example of CAPEX. This is because you need to purchase all the infrastructure upfront before you can use it. And that's exactly the core definition of capital expenditure. Whenever you have to pay upfront a large amount of money, that is counted as capital expenditure. Let's take one more question, question number 28. So Azure Reserved Virtual Machine instances are an example of OPEX. Is it true or is it false? The correct answer is false. Why? Because Azure Reserved Instance is where you pay upfront for the use of virtual machine for a period of time. For example, it could be 1 year or 3 years. This can save you money as you receive a discount on cost of a virtual machine if you pay upfront for a reserved instance. However, as this is an upfront payment, it will be classed as CAPEX and not OPEX. I hope this makes you clear when to choose CAPEX and when to choose OPEX. In our last series on AZ-900, many of you were confused, and that's why I have taken different examples on CAPEX and OPEX. In case you still have some questions or doubts, do let me know in the comment section. And here comes our question number 29. The question says Azure Cosmos DB is an example of which cloud offering? Your options are Platform as a Service or PaaS, Infrastructure as a Service or IaaS, Serverless or Software as a Service. The correct answer for this question is option A. So Azure Cosmos DB is an example of Platform as a Service. And friends, if you want to get a thorough understanding of differences between IaaS, Infrastructure as a Service, PaaS, which is Platform as a Service, or SaaS, which is Software as a Service, then you must watch this video which is now appearing on your screen. In this video, I have explained all the aspects of PaaS, IaaS, and SaaS with examples and use cases. So please go ahead, watch this video and understand what are the exact differences between Platform as a Service, Infrastructure as a Service, and Software as a Service. It's a very important concept and you must understand if you are trying for AZ-900. And that's why let's take one more question on IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. The question number 30 says, a Microsoft SQL Server database that is hosted in the cloud and has software updates managed by Azure is an example of disaster recovery as a service, or is it an example of infrastructure as a service, or is it platform as a service, or is it software as a service? The correct answer for this question is option C. So Microsoft SQL Server database is an example of platform as a service. And here friends, I want to stress on a very important point in this question. It's very clearly given in the question that the software updates are managed by Azure, and this important section of the question is the base or the logic behind choosing platform as a service as an answer to this question. Now let's check out our question number 31. The question says that your network contains an Active Directory forest. The forest contains 5,000 users and your company wants to migrate all the network resources to Azure and to decommission the on-premises data center. Now you need to recommend a solution to minimize the impact of users after the planned migration. So what should you recommend? Your options are implement the Azure Multi-Factor Authentication or MFA, or should you sync all the Active Directory user account to Azure Active Directory or Azure AD, or should you instruct all the users to change their password? And the last option is create a guest user account in Azure Active Directory for each user. And the correct answer for this question is option B, that you should sync all the Active Directory user accounts to Azure Active Directory. And the reason for same is because Azure Active Directory is Microsoft cloud-based identity and access management service, which helps your employees to sign in and access resources in. And there are two options: external resources and internal resources. So basically, external resources such as Microsoft Office 365, the Azure Portal, and thousands of other SaaS applications. Coming to the internal resources such as apps on your corporate network, intranet, along with any cloud apps developed by your own organization. And that's why Azure Active Directory is a correct option. Moving on with question number 32, we have which of the following is the best example of cloud computing? Your options are delivery of computing resources over internet, or setting up your own data center, or the last one is scalable computing. The correct answer for this question is option A, delivery of computing services over the internet. Now let's jump to the question number 33. The question says which of the following is not a feature of cloud computing? The options are latest technology, a limited pool of services, flexible resources, or economics of scale. The correct answer for this one is limited pool of services. Please keep in mind and read the questions very carefully. Sometimes Microsoft asks not a feature of cloud computing. Now let's move to question number 34. The question says that you plan to extend your company's network to Azure. The network contains a VPN appliance that uses an IP address of 131.107.200.1. Now you need to create an Azure resource that identifies the VPN appliance. Which Azure resource should you create? Your options are virtual network, load balancers, virtual network gateways, DNS zones, local network gateway, traffic manager profile, network watcher, application network gateways, CDN profile, or express route circuits. And the correct answer for this question is option E, local network gateway. Now let's move to the question number 35. This is the last question for our part 1 in AZ-900 updated exam Q&A series. And I promise I'm going to come up with new parts with a lot of new questions covering the new syllabus and your doubts. So let's read this question. The question number 35 says that you plan to implement an Azure database solution. You need to implement a database solution that meets the following requirement. And the requirements are that the database solution can add data concurrently from multiple regions. The second requirement is that it should be able to store JSON documents. What database services should you deploy? Your options are Azure Cosmos DB, Azure Database for MySQL servers, SQL Server, SQL Data Warehouse, or Azure Database for PostgreSQL Server. The correct answer for this question is option A, Azure Cosmos DB. So friends, always keep these two things in mind whenever there is a question about a database that should be able to scale multiple regions, and it should also support JSON documents. Without any doubt, you should always choose Cosmos DB. Hello and welcome back to the Tech Blackboard. Today in part 2 of our AZ-900 updated exam Q&A series, I've got 30 questions which will not only cover the questions based on the new course content but also cover some of the most discussed questions from our last series on AZ-900 real exam question and answer. And friends, if you find the content of this video worth your time, then please show your appreciation by pressing the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your likes help us grow and bring more such content to you and help you in your cloud journey. In case you are not aware, then a worth mention of our last series on AZ-900 real exam question and answer, the thumbnail for which is now visible on the screen, and the link is also shared both in the I button on the top right corner and in the description box below. And I cannot move forward without mentioning that if you are serious about passing AZ-900, then along with this new series, you must watch our old series which covers 191 questions. All these questions are still quite relevant, and for a complete coverage, you must watch this series as well. Friends, already almost 60,000 people have watched this series and benefited out of it. Let's begin our part 2 of AZ-900 updated exam Q&A series. And here comes the question number 36. And the question says that which of the following best explains cloud computing? Your options are delivery of computing resources over the internet. The second option is setting up your own data center. The third option is scalable computing. And the correct answer for this question is option A, delivery of computing services over the internet. Moving on with question number 37. The question says that which of the following is not a feature of cloud computing? The options are latest technology, a limited pool of services, flexible resources, or economic of scale. The correct answer for this question is option B, a limited pool of services. And the reason is that when you are using cloud computing offers you almost virtually unlimited pool of services. So you can create services or you can get the computing power as much as you want. Now moving on with question number 38, it says that which of the following is not a cloud computing? Your options are public cloud, scalable cloud, private cloud, or hybrid cloud. The correct answer for this question is option B, scalable cloud. So basically public cloud, private cloud, and hybrid cloud are type of cloud computing. However, there is no such thing as scalable cloud. Moving on with question number 39, and it says that if Microsoft plans to end the support of an Azure service that does not have a successor service, then Microsoft will provide notification at least 12 months before. Now the instruction says that you have to review the underlying text. So this is the underlying text. And if it makes the statement correct, then you have to select no change is needed, which is given here, the option A. And if the statement is incorrect, then you have to choose the answer that will make the statement correct. So now, do you think 12 months notification is the correct answer, or do you think it's 6 months or 90 days or 30 days? The correct answer for this question is option A, no change needed. So whenever there is a service that is going to get discontinued, in that case, Microsoft will always provide you a notification well before 12 months. Now let's move to an interesting question, question number 40. The question says that you have an application that is comprised of an Azure web app that has a service level agreement or SLA of 99.95% and an Azure SQL database that has an SLA of 99.99%. The composite SLA for the application is the product of both SLAs, which is equal to 99.94%. Now you have to review the underlying text, which is this one, 99.94%. And if it makes the statement correct, then you have to select the no change as we did in the previous question as well. And if this statement is incorrect, then you have to choose the answer out of these given options. Now let me take you to the Microsoft documentation and make you understand how these composite SLA are calculated, and then we will come back to answer this question. So this is the Microsoft documentation which talks about composite SLA, and here you can see that Microsoft has given an example. Similar to our question, Microsoft has also given an example which comprises of a solution that contains app service or web app which has a SLA of 99.95%, and the second service that this solution has is SQL database which has a SLA of 99.99%. Now let's see how a composite SLA is calculated for all the services in your solution. So what you simply have to do is you have to multiply the SLA of all your services, which is shown here as well. You can see that Microsoft has multiplied the SLA of first service 99.95 and then the SLA of second service 99.99, which gives us 99.94%. So nothing is super complex in calculating composite SLA, just a simple multiplication of all the SLA for all the services that you are using in your solution, and then you get a composite SLA. Coming back to our presentation, as we saw in the Microsoft documentation, we just need to multiply the two SLAs of the different services and then we get the final composite SLA. So here we have multiplied 99.95, which was the SLA of Azure Web App, and we have multiplied 99.99, which is the SLA of the Azure SQL database, and this gives us 99.94. So the correct answer for this question is option A, no change needed. Now let's move to question number 41. The question says that when you need to delegate permissions to several Azure virtual machines simultaneously, you must deploy Azure virtual machines to which of the following? Your options are Azure Region, Azure Availability Zone, Azure Resource Group, or Azure Resource Manager Template. The correct answer for this question is option C, Azure Resource Group. Moving on with question number 42, the question says that one of the benefits of Azure SQL Data Warehouse is the high availability is built into the platform. And in this question, again, you have to review the underlying text. And if this makes the statement correct, you have to select no change needed. And if this makes the statement incorrect, then you have to choose the answers out of the other given options. So do you think that one of the benefits of Azure SQL Data Warehouse is that high availability is built into it? Let's check out the answer, and the correct answer for this question is no change needed, which means that high availability is built into Azure SQL Data Warehouse. And here is one very important point for this question, that Microsoft can change this question because now Azure SQL Data Warehouse is changed to Azure Synapse Analytics. And the same we discussed in question number 4 of part 1. So in case instead of Azure Data Warehouse, you see the option of Azure Synapse Analytics, both are same. It's just that Azure Synapse Analytics is the modern name or the new name for Azure SQL Data Warehouse. Just a quick tip, because Microsoft can change things very quickly. Now let's move to question number 43, and this is a true false or yes no kind of question. The question says that authorization to access Azure resources can be provided only to Azure Active Directory or Azure AD users. You have to tell whether it's a true statement or a false statement. The correct answer for this one is it's a false statement. Quickly jumping to question number 44, identities stored in Azure Active Directory, Azure AD, third-party cloud services, and on-premises Active Directory can be used to access Azure resources. The correct answer for this one is false. Then moving on with question number 45, and it says that Azure has built-in authentication and authorization service that provides secure access to Azure resources. The correct answer very obviously is true. So Azure definitely has a built-in authentication and authorization service. Now let's move on to a very interesting drag and drop kind of question, question number 46. In this, you are given with some Azure services on the left hand side, and you are given with some of the definitions on the right hand side in the answer area. So basically what you need to do is match these Azure services with these definition on the right hand side. Now let's read the first right hand side definition in the answer area. The first one says that an if then else statement of assignments and access controls. Now very easily you can figure out that we are given with if then else statement. So basically you have to pick an Azure service that will enable you to create if then statement, which is none other than the conditional access. So conditional access, you can put lot of if that happens then you do this, if that happens then you do this. So that is what conditional access enables you to do. Moving on with the second statement, it says that this service is responsible for authentication, and this one is none other than the Azure AD. So Azure AD enables you to set authentication in Azure. And of course, the last one is responsible for authorization, which is RBAC. Also remember that Microsoft can change the format of the question. So instead of giving you a drag and drop kind of question, it can change the questions to, let's say, yes, no kind of question, true or false, multiple choices. So it's very important that you remember that what Azure services do. Moving on with question number 47, let's talk about Azure China. So the question says that Azure China is operated by Microsoft. You have to tell whether it's a true or a false, and the correct answer is this is a false statement. And to justify our answer, this is the Microsoft documentation which talks more about Azure China operation. And here you can read that in mainland China, Microsoft Azure is operated by 21 VNet, which is physically separated instance of cloud services located in mainland China. And that's the reason we have selected a false here. Moving on with question number 48, and it says that Azure Government is operated by Microsoft. And the correct answer for this question is true. Now you must remember, whenever we are talking about Azure Government, then we are always talking about the US government. We will see more questions in the coming slides. However, we talked about US government and Azure government in the question number 6 of part 1. So if you are looking for more details on Azure government, you can refer question number 6 of part 1. Now let's move to the question number 49, and it says that Azure government is available only to US government agencies and their partners. And the correct answer, of course, is true. Now let's jump to the question number 50, and this says that your company implements Azure policies to automatically add a watermark to Microsoft Word documents that contains credit card information. And in this question also you have to review the underlined text, and if this statement is correct using this underlined text, you have to choose no change. Otherwise you have to choose from all the options given below to make this statement correct. Now let's check out the correct answer for this question, and that one is option C, Azure Information Protection. So it's not Azure Policy that can help you to add watermark to the Word document, but this one is Azure Information Protection, or sometimes also known as AIP. And here comes little more information on Azure Information Protection, and this is used to automatically add a watermark to Microsoft Word documents that contains credit card information. You can use Azure Information Protection label to apply classification to the documents and emails. So do remember that it's not only Word document but also the emails which you can categorize using Azure Information Protection. Additionally, it says that when you do this, the classification is identifiable regardless of where the data is stored or with whom it's shared. The labels can include visual markings such as header, footer, or watermark. So friends, while I'm reading these lines for you, you have to mark the keywords because Microsoft Azure can change the question in the real exam. So instead of asking watermark, they can ask you for the footer or the header, or instead of asking for the Microsoft Word document, they can also include the emails. However, now I am sure that you understand what Azure Information Protection does. Now let's move to question number 51, and here I present more questions on Azure China. So Azure China is operated by 21 ViaNet. And just a little while back, I showed you that yes, Azure China is operated by 21 ViaNet. And once again, for those who have missed the previous question, this is the Microsoft documentation. And here it's clearly mentioned that Azure service in China is operated by 21 ViaNet. Now let's read the question number 52, and it says that Microsoft Azure services operated by 21 ViaNet are standalone instance separating from Azure Global Service. And the correct answer for this question is true. Once again, on the same documentation, in second point, it's written that Microsoft Azure Service operated by 21 ViaNet are standalone instances separating it from the global Azure services. And that's why we have chosen true here. Now let's move to the question number 53, and this one says that the services availability is not identical to the global Azure. The correct answer for this question is true. Referring the same Microsoft documentation, it's mentioned here that therefore the service availability is not identical to the global Azure. So friends, I hope now you understand what are the different kind of questions that can come on Azure China and Azure Government. Once again, I will reiterate that whenever it's Azure Government, it's always related to the USA. Now let's move to question number 54, and this one says that Azure Government is designed for any government worldwide, US government and UK government. And I just told you that Azure government is always related to the US government. Let's move to question number 55. And it says that Microsoft Office 365, Xbox Live and Microsoft Intune is an example of software as a service or SaaS, infrastructure as a service or IaaS, or platform as a service, PaaS. The correct answer for this one is software as a service. Friends, I am hopeful that you are liking the questions so far and understanding them well. If so, then please press the like button as this helps our videos to reach a larger audience. Also, do share your doubts or any other questions that you want to ask on AZ-900 in the comment section, and I will take up all those questions in the next part. And you are most welcome to join us on the other social media platform, the handles for which is now flashing on your screen. Now let's jump to the question number 56. And this says that you have resource group named RG1 and you plan to create virtual networks and app services in RG1. Now you need to prevent the creation of virtual machines only in RG1. The solution must ensure that other objects can be created in RG1. So basically you have to ensure that virtual machines should not be created in RG1. However, there is no restriction on the other resource. And the options given in the question is a lock, an Azure role, a tag, or an Azure policy. And the correct answer for this question is option D, an Azure policy. Now let me give you a little bit more detail on Azure policy. So Azure policies can be used to define requirements for resource properties during deployment and for already existing resources. Azure policies controls properties such as type or location of resources. And that's what we are also looking. We are controlling the type of resources. We want to restrict the creation of virtual machine. On the other hand, we can let go the creation of all the other resources. Similarly, you can use Azure policies to control the location of resources. Also, it's given that Azure Policy is a service in Azure that you can use to create, assign, and manage policies. These policies enforce different rules and effects over your resources so the resources stay compliant with your corporate standards and service level agreements. Azure Policy is one of the very important services in Azure, so you must learn about Azure policies. Moving on with question number 57, and this one says that Azure Advisor provides recommendation on how to improve security on Azure Active Directory environment. Do you think it's a true statement or is it a false statement? Let's see the answer. The answer is it's a false statement. Now let's move to the other questions and see what you can use Azure Advisor for. So in question number 58, it says that Azure Advisor provides recommendation on how to configure the network settings on Azure Virtual Machine. Is it true or is it false? This one again is false. And now let's figure out what Azure Advisor can be used for. So in question number 59, it says that Azure Advisor provides recommendation on how to reduce cost of running Azure Virtual Machine. And this statement is obviously true. So friends, what I try to essentially do is to group the questions on one of Azure service and present it to you in one shot. Hopefully this grouping of question will surely help you when you're giving the actual exam. Now let's jump to the question number 60, and this one says that after you create a virtual machine, you need to modify the network security group or NSG to allow connection to TCP port 8080 on virtual machine. The instruction again are the same. You have to review the underlying text, this one NSG, and you have to choose no change needed if this is a correct statement. Otherwise, you have to choose out of these given options. So the first option given is, of course, no change needed. The second option is virtual network gateway. The third one is virtual network, and the fourth one is route table. The correct answer for this question is option A, no change needed. Now let me give you the reasoning behind it. Here you can read that when you create a virtual machine, the default setting is to create the NSG or network security group attached to the network interface assigned to a virtual machine. A NSG works like a firewall. You can attach a network security group to a virtual network or individual subnets within the virtual network. You can also attach NSG to a network interface assigned to a virtual machine. Also, you can read that you can use multiple NSG within a virtual network to restrict traffic between resources such as virtual machine and subnet. Please mind that network security group can be applied on different level, and that's exactly what I have explained in this paragraph. Now let's move to another interesting question, question number 61. This one says that several support engineers plan to manage Azure by using the computers shown in the table below. And here you can see that we have three computers, 1, 2, and 3, and the operating systems are also given. For the first one, we have Windows 10. For the second one, we have Ubuntu. And for the third one is Mac OS Mojave or Mojave. Further, the question says that you need to identify which Azure management tool can be used for each computer. What should you identify for each computer? And to answer, you have to select the appropriate option in the answer area. And of course, you are already noting that each correct answer is worth 1 point. So here you are given with options for each of the computer, and you have to choose one option for each computer. For each computer, the options given are same. The first option is Azure CLI and Azure Portal, Azure Portal and Azure Powershell. The third option given is Azure CLI and Azure Powershell. And the fourth option given is Azure CLI, Azure Portal and Azure Powershell. Now friends, let me give you the answer and then I will give you my understanding of why I have picked this answer. And this is because, as you might be seeing, a lot of variations in the answer of these questions on various sites. So the correct answer for computer 1, 2 and 3 is Azure CLI, Azure Portal and Azure PowerShell. Now let me give you my reasoning for this. So basically Azure CLI can be installed everywhere. And here is the Microsoft documentation to prove that. Here you can see it's written that Azure CLI is available to install Windows, Mac OS and Linux environment. In fact, you can also run the Azure CLI on Docker container and Azure Cloud Shell. And this makes Azure CLI a correct answer as it can run on Windows 10, Ubuntu or Mac OS. Moving on with Azure Portal, Azure Portal is basically browser based. So you can access Azure Portal in any device in which you can open any browser. That's why Azure Portal is also a correct option. Then moving on with Azure PowerShell. So Azure PowerShell can also run on every system. There are some prerequisites to run Azure PowerShell, but surely it can run on any of the operating system. And if you are interested to read more on Azure PowerShell, then this is the Microsoft documentation. And this documentation will guide you on how to install Azure PowerShell using the module PowerShell Get. Importantly, note that it's written that this will give you instruction to work on Windows, Mac OS and Linux. And these are the three operating systems mentioned in our question as well. That's the reason I have included PowerShell also in my answer. Now, hopefully after seeing the Microsoft documentation, I am sure that you are clear about the logic of choosing all these options as an answer for all the three computers, or should I say for all the three operating systems. However, if you have some different answer or some different logic, I will be happy to hear that in comment section. And with that, let's move to the next question, and that is about Azure Germany. So this says that Azure Germany can be used by legal residents of Germany only. So you have to tell whether it's a valid statement or do you need to fix this statement by choosing one of these given options. So the options given are no change needed. The second option is only enterprises that are registered in Germany. The third option is only enterprises that purchase their Azure licenses from a partner based in Germany. And the last option is any user or enterprise that requires its data to reside in Germany. And the correct answer obviously is option D. With that question, one more time, I'm going to repeat and summarize for you so that the questions and the answer imprints in your mind. So first of all, we have Azure Government, which is related to the US government. The second one is Azure China, and the third one is Azure Germany. And just to leave you with a little bit more details on Azure Germany, so Azure Germany is available to the eligible customers and partners globally who intend to do business in EU, EFTA, including the United Kingdom. Azure Germany offers a separate instance of Microsoft Azure services from within the German data centers. So the data centers are located in two locations, Frankfurt and Magdeburg. Hopefully now you will be able to handle any question in this area. Moving on with question number 63. This says that authorization to access Azure resources can be provided only to Azure Active Directory users. Is it a true or a false statement? The correct answer is it's a false statement. Moving on with question number 64, it says identities stored in Azure Active Directory, third-party cloud services, and on-premises Active Directory can be used to access Azure resources. The correct answer is false. And then we have question number 65. It says that Azure has built-in authentication and authorization service that provides secure access to Azure resources. The correct answer for this question is true. Now friends, I already know that these questions are repeated, but as I always say, repetition is very important and it can really help you to recall the answers in the real exam. And with that thought, I would like to close our part 2 on AZ-900 updated exam Q&A series. Hello and welcome back to the Tech Blackboard. Today in part 3 of our AZ-900 updated exam Q&A series, I've got 35 questions on AZ-900 covering the new course content and some of your previous doubt questions. It is worth mentioning about our previously hugely successful series on AZ-900. The thumbnail for which is now visible on the screen, and the link is shared both in the I button on the top right corner and in the description box below. Please make a point that this previous series is still quite relevant and you must watch it along with this new series to make sure that you cover the entire course content on AZ-900, including the changes done in May 2022. So let's begin our part 3 with question number 66. The question says that you need to ensure that when Azure Active Directory users connect to Azure AD from the internet by using anonymous IP address, the users are prompted to automatically change their password. Which Azure service should you use? The important keyword here is anonymous IP address. So keep this in mind because this will help you relate the answer when we go to the Microsoft documentation. For now, the options given are Azure AD Connect Health or Azure AD Privileged Identity Management. The third option is Azure Advanced Threat Protection or ATP. And the fourth one is Azure AD Identity Protection. The correct answer for this question is option D, Azure AD Identity Protection. Now let me take you to the Microsoft documentation, but before that, keep in mind anonymous IP address. So here is the Microsoft documentation that talks more on what is identity protection. You can read in the first line itself that identity protection is a tool that allows organizations to accomplish three key tasks. The three key tasks are automate the detection and remediation of identity-based risk, investigate risk using data in the portal, and the third key task is export risk detection data to your SIEM. And in this very documentation, if you will scroll down a little more, you will reach to this section which says risk detection and remediation. Here you can read that identity protection identifies risk of many types, and that includes anonymous IP address use. And this is exactly what is given in our question as well. So you can read a lot about identity protection in this page. The link for this page is available in the description box. Now let's move to the other question, question number 67. The question says that which two types of customers are eligible to use Azure Government to develop a cloud solution? Each correct answer presents a complete solution. You have to note that each correct selection is worth 1 point. The options given are a Canadian government contractor, a European government contractor, a United States government entity, or United States government contractor. The last one is a European government entity. The correct answer for this question is option C and option D. If you remember, in part 2 of this series, we covered a lot on Azure Government. Not only that, we also covered Azure China. So if you are looking for more details on Azure Government or Azure China, then please go back to the part 2. But for now, a quick exam tip is whenever the question is asking about Azure Government, then always be sure that Azure Government always relates to the United States. Moving on with question number 68, the question says that you plan to migrate a web application to Azure. The web application is accessed by external users. Now you need to recommend a cloud deployment solution to minimize the amount of administrative efforts used to manage the web application. What should you include in the recommendation? Your options are infrastructure as a service, database as a service, software as a service, or platform as a service. The correct answer for this question is option D, platform as a service. And the reason is normally the web application only need a platform to be hosted and to run. That's why we have chosen platform as a service. Now friends, few days back I made a video on the differences between infrastructure as a service, software as a service, and platform as a service. It's very important to understand the difference between these three because this will help you create the solution and choose the right services. So I strongly recommend to watch this video which is now appearing on the screen. The link is also available in the I button on the top right corner and in the description box. Let's move to question number 69. The question number 69 says, what can Azure Information Protection encrypt? Can it encrypt network traffic or documents and email messages, or can it encrypt an Azure storage account or an Azure SQL database? The correct answer for this question is option B. You can use Azure Information Protection to encrypt documents and email messages. Now let's move to question number 70. The question says that what should you use to evaluate whether your company's Azure environment meets the regulatory requirement? Your options are the Knowledge Center, the Advisor Blade from the Azure Portal, or the Compliance Manager from the Security Trust Portal, or the last option is the Security Center Blade from the Azure Portal. The correct answer for this question is option D, the Security Center Blade from the Azure Portal. Let me give you a little more detail on this one. So Azure Security Center helps you prevent, detect, and respond to the threats with increased visibility into and control over security of your Azure resources. So it also provides you with integrated security monitoring and policy management across your subscription and also helps you detect threats that might otherwise go unnoticed. Additionally, it works with the broad ecosystems of security solution. In order to access Security Center, you have to sign into Azure Portal, then you have to browse the services, and then you have to look for the Security Center. And that's how you access Security Center Blade from Azure Portal. Now let's move to question number 71. The question says that you have an Azure virtual network named VNet1 in a resource group named RG1. Now the question says that you assign an Azure policy specifying that virtual networks are not an allowed resource type in RG1. So basically you are stopping creation of virtual network in resource type, which is called RG1. Now the question says that VNet1 is deleted automatically. So you have to review this underlined statement and you have to tell whether it's a correct statement or do you need to change the statement to make it correct. And your options are no change needed, is moved automatically to another resource group, continues to function normally, or the last option is now a read-only object. The correct answer for this question is option C, continues to function normally. Now let's move to question number 72, which is a true or false kind of question. Reading the question says that Azure Firewall will encrypt all the traffic sent from Azure to the internet. Is it a true or a false statement? The correct answer for this question is that this is a false statement. So Azure Firewall basically is used to allow or block traffic based on source destination IP address, ports or protocol. Moving ahead with question number 73, it says a network security group or NSG will encrypt all the traffic sent from Azure to the internet. The correct answer for this question again is a false, and this is because network security group does not encrypt network traffic. It actually works in a similar way as the firewall, so it allows or block the traffic based on source or destination IP address, ports or protocol, similar to what we saw in question number 72. And with that, let's move to question number 74. And this one says that Azure virtual machines that run on Windows Server 2016 can encrypt network traffic sent to the internet, whether it's a true or it's a false statement. The correct answer for this question is false. See, Windows Server does come with the VPN client and it also supports other encryption methods such as IPsec encryption or SSL or TLS. However, as I understand, the virtual machine could not encrypt the traffic to an internet host that is not configured to require the encryption. So little confusing question as not all the dots are given in the question to join and give the correct answer. To help you further, this is the Microsoft documentation that you can refer and understand more on Azure data security and encryption best practices. The link for this page is also available in the description box. So it would be really interesting for me if you share your thoughts on this question in the comment section, and then we can have an engaging discussion over this question, and surely this will benefit all our viewers. Now let's move to the question number 75. The question says that which of the following describes platform as a service? Your options are users are responsible for purchasing, installing, configuring and managing their own software, operating system, middleware and application. The second option is users create and deploy applications quickly without having to worry about managing the underlying infrastructure. The third option is users pay an annual or monthly subscription. The correct answer for this question is option D, where users can create and deploy applications quickly without having to worry about managing the underlying infrastructure. Now let's do some dragging and dropping in question number 76. In this question, you are given with some of the Azure services on the left hand side. Then on the right hand side, you can say there is a statement or there is a definition given which you have to match with the Azure services. So let's read the first statement. It says provides a digital online assistant that provides speech support. The correct answer for this question is Azure Bot Service. The second statement says uses past training to provide prediction that have high probability. The correct Azure service that matches this one is Azure Machine Learning. Then we have some service that provides serverless computing functionalities. The correct service matching this one is Azure Functions. And then we have processes data from millions of sensors. The correct service that matches this one is Azure IoT Hub. Now friends, these questions are not only interesting but also very important from the exam point of view, because not only they will let you understand a lot of Microsoft Azure services in one shot, but also will help you understand a lot of Azure services when you are actually working on Microsoft Azure. Now let's move to question number 77. The question says that your company has an Azure environment that contains resources in several regions. A company policy states that administrators must only be allowed to create additional Azure resources in a region in the country where their office is located. Now you need to create the Azure resource that must be used to meet the policy requirement. What should you create? Your options are read-only log, an Azure policy, a management group, or a reservation. The correct answer for this question is option B, an Azure policy. Now let me give you a little more detail on Azure Policy. So Azure Policy is a service in Azure that you use to create, assign and manage policies. These policies enforce different rules and effect over your resource so the resource stay compliant with your corporate standards and service level agreements. Azure Policy meets this need by evaluating your resources for non-compliance with assigned policy. For example, you can have a policy that allow only a certain SKU size of virtual machine in your environment. Once this policy is implemented, new and existing resources are evaluated for compliance. With the right type of policy, existing resource can be brought into compliance. Hopefully, this will help you understanding Azure Policy, which is one of very important services in Microsoft Azure. Now let's move to question number 78, and this one says that you need to configure an Azure solution that meets the following requirement. The first requirement is that it should secure websites from attacks, and the second requirement is that it should generate reports that contain details of attempted attacks. What should you include in the solution? Your options are Azure Firewall, Azure Network Security Group, Azure Information Protection, or DDoS Protection. The correct answer for this question is option D, DDoS protection. And here is a quick explanation on DDoS. DDoS, which is actually distributed denial of service attacks, are some of the largest availability and security concerns facing customers that are moving their applications to the cloud. A DDoS attack attempts to exhaust an application's resources, making the application unavailable to the legitimate users. DDoS attacks can be targeted at any endpoint that is publicly reachable through the internet. So if you are working with any solution that has public endpoint, you must consider DDoS attack and architect your solution accordingly. Now let's move to the next question, question number 79. The question says that your company has data centers in Los Angeles and New York. The company has Microsoft Azure subscription. You are configuring the two data centers as geo-cluster sites for site resiliency. You need to recommend an Azure storage redundancy option. You have the following data storage requirement. The first requirement is that data must be stored on multiple nodes. The second one is data must be stored on nodes in separate geographical locations. The third requirement is data can be read from the secondary location as well as from the primary location. Which of the following Azure stored redundancy options should you recommend? Your options are geo-redundant storage, read-only geo-redundant storage, zone redundant storage, or locally redundant storage. The correct answer for this question is option B, read-only geo-redundant storage. Now friends, in our last series on AZ-900, many of you asked me a question that why to choose read-only geo-redundant storage over geo-redundant storage, even if read-only geo-redundant storage is little costlier. Now here you have to understand that in case of geo-redundant storage, the second region cannot be accessed or read from until the storage account fails over. On the other hand, the RAGRS or read-only geo-redundant storage allows you to have higher read availability for your storage account by providing read-only access to the data replicated to the secondary location. So once you have enabled this feature, the secondary location may be used to achieve higher availability in the event the data is not available in the primary region. And that's exactly one of the requirements of this question. So this is the logic behind choosing read-only geo-redundant storage over geo-redundant storage. In case you still have any confusion on this question, do let me know in the comment section. But before moving to the next question, let me give you Microsoft documentation that you can refer to understand all of these storages given here in the question. So this is the Microsoft documentation where you can read all about the Azure storage redundancy. And this is very important to understand. High availability is one of the key aspects of any good solution in Microsoft Azure or any other cloud solution. Now let's move to question number 80. The question says that you are building an application using virtual machine in Azure. As a security requirement, it is necessary to apply Azure multi-factor authentication based on certain condition. Which Azure service should you use? Your options are Azure Monitor, Azure Advanced Threat Protection, Azure Active Directory ID Protection, or Azure Security Center. The correct answer for this question is option C, Azure Active ID Protection. Now let me give you a little more details on all the services listed here in the question. Azure Monitor, which is the incorrect option because this is for collecting what is known as Azure monitoring data. It has nothing to do with Azure multi-factor authentication. Moving on with Azure Advanced Threat Protection, this is incorrect because it is used to monitor and analyze user activity as information across the network, such as permissions and group membership. And as you can see, this also is not related to Azure multi-factor authentication. Moving on with Azure Active Directory ID Protection, which is a correct answer because this allows you to apply MFA with conditions. And that's what our question is also asking, that we have to implement Azure multi-factor authentication based on certain conditions. And it is also used to detect risks such as anonymous IP address logins, unfamiliar sign-ins, and credentials leak. Hopefully, this makes you clear why we have chosen Azure Active Directory ID Protection as an answer to this question. Moving on with Azure Security Center. So basically, Azure Security Center is an integrated infrastructure security management system that enhances security structure of data center. It's an advanced threat protection feature that protects your entire hybrid workload both on cloud and on premises. With this option, you cannot, however, use MFA or multi-factor authentication. Friends, if you have liked the questions so far, please give a like to this video, subscribe to the channel, and share these videos with anyone who is learning Azure. Now let's jump to question number 81. The question says an Azure administrator plans to run PowerShell script that creates Azure resources. You need to recommend which computer configuration to use to run the script. Which three computers can run the script? Each answer presents a complete solution and each correct selection is worth 1 point. Your options are given here. Option A is a computer that runs Windows 10 and has Azure Powershell module installed. Option B is a computer that runs macOS and has PowerShell Core 6.0 installed. Option C is a computer that runs on Linux and has Azure PowerShell module installed. Option D is a computer that runs Linux and has Azure CLI tool installed. And option E is a computer that runs Chrome OS and uses Azure Cloud Shell. The correct three answer for this question is option A, option C, and option D. Now let me give you a little bit of explanation for each answer. So in option A, which is a correct option, we already have Azure PowerShell module installed, and that's why we can run the script. Coming to the option B with macOS and PowerShell Core 6.0 installed. However, we are missing with Azure PowerShell module. So PowerShell Core 6.0 itself is not enough. Moving on with option C, which is a correct option. Here we have PowerShell module installed and thus we can run the script. Coming to the option D, here we have Linux and we have Azure CLI. This combination itself is not enough to run the script. And then we have option E, which has Chrome OS and that uses Azure Cloud Shell. And from the Azure Cloud Shell, you can easily execute Azure PowerShell commandlets. So these were the reason why we have chosen option A, option C, and option E. Now let's move to question number 82. The question says that your Azure environment contains multiple Azure virtual machines. You need to ensure that a virtual machine named VM1 is accessible from the internet over HTTP. What are the two possible solutions? Each correct answer presents a complete solution and each correct selection is worth 1 point. Your options are modify an Azure Traffic Manager profile, modify a network security group, modify a DDoS protection plan, or modify an Azure firewall. The correct answer for this question is option B and option D. Now let me give you a little bit more details on Azure Network Security Group. So Azure Network Security Group acts as a firewall and you can attach NSG to a virtual network or individual subnet within the virtual network. Additionally, you can also attach NSG to a network interface assigned to a virtual machine. Also, it's important that you note that you can use NSG within a virtual network to restrict traffic between resources such as virtual machines and subnets. Network Security Group and Azure Firewall are two very important concepts when it comes to security of your virtual machines, network, and subnets. Moving on with question number 83, which is a yes-no kind of question. And here, let's read the first statement. The first statement says each Azure subscription can contain multiple account administrator. You have to tell whether it's a yes or it's a no. The correct answer for this question is no. Now let me give you all the answers first, and then I will give you my logic behind choosing these answers. So let's read the second statement, which says each Azure subscription can be managed by using a Microsoft account only. The correct answer for this is no. Moving on with the third statement, we have an Azure resource group contains multiple Azure subscription. The correct answer for this one is also no. And here comes the logic for each of the statement. So in the first one, I have given the answer as no, and the reason is account administrator. So if I go with the Microsoft documentation, it says that you can have one account administrator and one service administrator. You can also have lot of co-administrator per subscription. Here it's important that we are talking about account administrator, which can only be one, and that's why I have chosen no for this statement. Then for the second statement, my logic is that you need an Azure Active Directory account to manage a subscription, not a Microsoft account. So an account is actually created in Azure Active Directory when you create the subscription. Further, the accounts can be created in Azure Active Directory to manage the subscription. Then for the third statement, which is also marked as no, my logic is that resource groups are logical containers for Azure resources. However, resource group do not contain subscription. It's actually the vice versa. Subscription contains the resource group, and that's why I have marked this as no. Now friends, you will find other versions of answers on many other sites for these statements. And I would really like to understand what are your logic for these statements. You can surely comment your thoughts on these statements in the comment section. Now let's move to question number 84, which says that which of the following provides a command platform for deploying objects to your cloud infrastructure and maintaining consistency throughout your Azure environment. Your options are Azure Policy, Azure Resource Group, Azure Resource Manager, or Management Group. The correct answer for this question is option C, Azure Resource Manager. And here is a quick detail on Azure Resource Manager, which is a service that provides a management layer that allows you to create, update, delete Azure resources, all while maintaining consistency across your Azure environment. And that's exactly what our question is also looking for. Moving on with question number 85, this one says that which of the following is the logical unit of Azure services that links to an Azure account? Options are Azure subscription, management group, or resource group. The correct answer for this question is option A, Azure subscription. And here comes our question number 86, which says which of the following can be used to help you enforce resource tagging so you can manage billing? Your options are Azure Policy, Azure Service Health, or Compliance Manager. The correct answer for this one is option A, Azure Policy. Quickly jumping to question number 87, which says which of the following refers to the spending money upfront and then deducting expense over the time? Your options are capital expenditure, operational expenditure, or supply and demand. The correct answer for this one is capital expenditure. We have already discussed capital expenditure or CAPEX and operational expenditure or OPEX in our previous parts in quite some detail. However, a quick reference for you that whenever it's a capital expenditure, it means that you are referring to the expense which is upfront. For example, you are creating your own data center. In this case, you incur a huge upfront expenditure whenever you are setting up your data center. Coming to the operational expenditure, keep in mind whenever we are talking about operational expenditure, it's a recurring cost. For example, you pay for your mobile bills or your electricity bill or maybe your Netflix or Amazon Prime subscription. All these are example of operational expenditure. The keyword for operational expenditure is recurring cost. Now let's move to question number 88, and it says that from the choices below, which is one advantage of moving your infrastructure to Azure? The first one is that the move reduces capital expenditure, or it reduces operational expenditure, or the third option is that the move allows for complete control over infrastructure resources. And the correct answer for this question is option A, that the move reduces your capital expenditure. And I have explained this many times that the core essence to moving to Azure cloud or any other cloud is operational expenditure. So cloud services let you reduce your capital expenditure to a great extent and then move from capital expenditure to operational expenditure. And here comes our question number 89, that says which cloud model provides the greatest degree of ownership and control? Your options are hybrid, private or public. The correct answer is obviously private cloud. Coming to question number 90, it says that which cloud model provides greatest degree of flexibility? The correct answer for this question is hybrid cloud. Please mind the difference between both the questions. In question number 89, we were talking about greatest degree of ownership and control. However, in question number 90, we are talking about greatest degree of flexibility, and that's why we have chosen hybrid cloud. Hybrid cloud is a combination of both public and private cloud, and that's why it offers greater degree of flexibility. Looking at the importance of capital expenditure and operational expenditure, let's take some quick questions and understand when to choose capital expenditure and when to choose operational expenditure. Here comes the question 91, and that says that Azure pay-as-you-go pricing is an example of capital expenditure. The correct answer for this one is false because Azure pay-as-you-go is a operational expenditure. Then moving on with question number 92, Azure Reserved Virtual Machine instances are an example of operational expenditure. The correct answer for this one is false because Azure Reserved Virtual Machine are capital expenditure. In case of Azure Reserved Virtual Machine, you reserve virtual machines for a longer period of time and thereby you get some discounts on the pricing of the virtual machine. So in case of Azure Reserved Virtual Machine, you are paying upfront for a longer period of time. And that's why it's a capital expenditure and not operational expenditure. Moving on with question number 93, it says that deploying your own data center is an example of capital expenditure. The correct answer for this question is true. Now let's move to question number 94, and this one says that paying electricity for your data center is an example of operational expenditure. The correct answer for this one is true. And this is because paying electricity bill for your data center is a recurring cost. You have to pay electricity bill month on month. So it's a repeated cost and that's why it categorized as operational expenditure. Now let's jump to question number 95. This one says that you have an Azure environment that contains multiple Azure virtual machines. You plan to implement a solution that enables the client computers on your on-premises network to communicate to the Azure virtual machine. You need to recommend which Azure resources must be created for the planned solution. So basically you have to choose two Azure resources for your recommendation. Your options are a virtual network gateway, a load balancer, an application gateway, a virtual network, and the last one is a gateway subnet. The correct answer for this question is option A, a virtual network gateway, and option E, a gateway subnet. Now let's move to question number 96. This one says that your company is planning to move from on-premises environment to Azure and you have decided to develop your application using Docker as a development environment. So which of the following is the best service to use for this scenario? Your options are Azure App Service, Azure Container Instances, Azure Functions, or Azure Virtual Machine. The correct answer is very obviously Azure Container Service. A little bit more on Azure Container Service, which is a service that runs Docker containers on demand within your Azure environment. It can operate inside a separate container without orchestration and run event-driven application, deploy quickly from container deployment pipeline and run the data processing and build jobs. Azure Container or container in general are quite interesting and very much in demand these days in the market, a must read for every cloud enthusiast. And with that, let's move to question number 97. And this one says that you can use Azure Policy to download published audit reports and how Microsoft builds and operates its cloud services. You need to tell whether it's true or false. The correct answer that it is a false statement. So let's see what is the correct Microsoft service. For that, let's read the question number 98. It says that you can use Service Trust Portal to download published audit reports and how Microsoft builds and operates its cloud services. And this time, this one is a true statement. And now comes question number 99. Choose an international organization that develops international standards for privacy and compliance. Your options are international governmental and defense agencies, GDPR, International Civil Defense Organization, and the last one is International Organization for Standardization, or better known as ISO. And I'm hopeful you have already guessed the answer, which is option D, International Organization for Standardization. Now, let's read question number 100. You need to identify the type of failure for which an Azure availability zone can be used to protect access to Azure services. What should you identify? Your options are a storage failure, an Azure region failure, a physical server failure, or an Azure data center failure. The correct answer for this question is option D, an Azure data center failure. Hello and welcome back to the Tech Blackboard. Today in part 4 of AZ-900 updated Q&A series, I bring a set of 35 questions, of which some are completely new questions and some questions are there to clear your doubts from our earlier series on AZ-900. And as always, if you find this video useful in your cloud learning, please do not forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel and press that notification bell. Earlier in this series, we have already covered 100 questions divided in 3 parts. So in total, we have covered 135 questions in this series, including this part 4. As many of you might be joining us for the first time today, I would specifically like to mention that besides these 4 parts covering 135 questions, I have already released a video that contains 191 questions on AZ-900. And you can note the thumbnail of this video right in the middle of your screen. And friends, almost 70,000 viewers have watched this video and got benefited in their AZ-900 certification exam. So let's begin our part 4 with question number 101. The question says North America is represented by a single Azure region. You have to tell whether it's a true or a false statement. The correct answer is that this is a false statement. Reason being that North America has several Azure regions, including West US, Central US, South Central US, East US, and Canada East. So North America is not a single Azure region, but it has multiple Azure regions. Moving on with question number 102. This one says Azure Web App, Azure Logic App, and Azure SQL Database are examples of platform as a service. You have to tell true or false. The correct answer is true. So all these services that I have mentioned in this question are example of platform as a service. Now let's move to question number 103, and this one says DNS server runs on a virtual machine is an example of PaaS or platform as a service. Whether this is a true statement or it's a false statement. The correct answer is that this one is a false statement. And the reason is that in general, PaaS or platform as a service is about a platform where a developer can assign and deploy an application. So in a regular DNS server that runs on a virtual machine, this is not a PaaS offering. An Azure virtual machine is considered as IaaS or infrastructure as a service, as it offers computing resources. And that's why DNS server running on virtual machine is not considered as PaaS offering. Moving on with question number 104. This one says SQL Server installed on a virtual machine is a SaaS or software as a service. The correct answer of this question is false. And the reason is that if you install SQL Server on a virtual machine manually or by using out-of-the-box image, it is still a virtual machine. And as I just mentioned, virtual machine is considered as infrastructure as a service. So this means that as a customer, you still need to manage all the platform aspects. In simple words, you have to maintain the operating system settings, patches, middleware, and SQL Server runtime settings. And that's why this is not a software as a service. Now let's jump to question number 105, and this one says that Azure SQL Database is an example of PaaS or platform as a service. The correct answer for this one is true. Please mind that in question number 104, we discussed about SQL Server on virtual machine. And in this question, we are discussing about Azure SQL Database. So there is a difference between both of them. Whenever you are getting these questions, please read the Azure service very carefully before answering the question. And here is a quick explanation that customers who purchase Azure SQL database don't need to maintain anything related to SQL platform because Microsoft manages that. They just need to use it by deploying their tables and data and consuming it within their application. And that's why this is a platform as a service. It's not a software as a service because they still need to maintain the database in order for their applications to work. Now let's move to question number 106, and this one says that Azure Files is an example of SaaS or software as a service. The correct answer for this question is false. And the reason for this one is that Azure Files is a PaaS or platform as a service offering provided by Microsoft that is built on top of Azure Storage. It provides fully managed file shares over a protocol called SMB or server message blocks. Friends, you might get many questions in AZ-900 exam where you would need to categorize different Azure services as IaaS, PaaS or SaaS. So I have tried to cover many Azure services in these 6 questions and also gave you the logic behind categorizing them as IaaS, PaaS or SaaS. If you still have some doubts or want to learn IaaS, PaaS and SaaS in more details, then do watch this video on your screen. The link for the same is available in the description box. And now let's jump to question number 107. The question says that cloud computing leverages virtualization to provide services to multiple customers simultaneously. You have to tell whether it's a true or a false statement. The correct answer is true. Virtualization is core for any cloud service, be it Azure, Google Cloud or AWS. And to all my viewers, if you or your friends are also preparing for DP900, AZ-104 or AI900, then these are the videos that you can refer for your preparations. You can see that we have covered a lot of questions for each of the examination series. And to further help you learn in offline mode, you can get a free PDF file containing all the questions with answers discussed in these series. Now let's move to question number 108. The question says that you need to identify the type of failure for which an Azure availability zone can be used to protect access to the Azure services. What should you identify? Your options are a storage failure, an Azure region failure, a physical server failure, or an Azure data center failure. The correct answer for this question is an Azure data center failure. A little bit more on availability zone. So availability zones expand the level of control. You have to maintain the availability of the applications and the data on your virtual machines. An availability zone is a physically separate zone within an Azure region. Moving on with question number 109, the question says that use DDoS protection service in combination with a web application firewall for protection at both Layer 3 and Layer 4 offered by DDoS protection standard and the Layer 7 offered by WAF or web application firewall. Your options are physical security, identity and access, perimeter, network, compute, application and data. And the correct answer for the first blank, this one is network, and the second blank here is application. Now let's move to question number 110. The question says a company is planning on deploying Microsoft Azure resources to a resource group, but the resources would belong to different locations. Can you have resources that belong to the same resource group but in multiple locations? The correct answer for this question is yes. And the reason is that when creating a resource group, you need to provide a location for that resource group. Now friends, in the past also I have been asked many times, why does a resource group need a location? And if the resources can have different locations than resource group, why does the resource group location matter at all? And if these kind of questions bother you as well and you are looking for the answer, then you must watch this video that is now available on your screen. And in this video, you will find answers to all the questions that you have in your mind related to Azure Resource Group. There are a lot of exam tips in this video along with a hands-on lab on Azure Resource Group. So do watch this video, as understanding resource group is not only beneficial for the AZ-900 examination, but it is also important that you understand resource group because this is a core essence of managing all the resources in Azure. So much so that you cannot create any Azure resource without a resource group. Now let's read question number 111. The question says a company is planning on hosting an application on a set of virtual machines. The virtual machines are going to be running for a prolonged duration of time. Which of the following should be considered to reduce overall cost of virtual machine usage? Your options are premium disk, virtual machine skill set. The third option is Azure reservation, and the last one is Azure resource group. The correct answer for this question is option C, Azure reservation. And this is the Microsoft documentation on what are Azure reservation. Here you can read that Azure reservation help you save money by committing to 1 year or 3-year plan for multiple products. Committing allows you to get a discount on resources you use. Also note that reservation can significantly reduce your resource cost by up to 72% from pay-as-you-go prices. You can read a lot on Azure reservation on this documentation. The link for this documentation is available in the description box. Now let's move to question number 112. This one says, what are the 2 characteristics of public cloud? Each correct answer presents a complete solution. Your options are dedicated hardware, unsecured connection, limited storage, metered pricing, or self-service management. And the correct answers for this question are metered pricing and self-service management. Now let me give you reasoning behind each of the option. So dedicated hardware, which is a wrong option, because in public cloud you don't have a dedicated hardware. It is actually shared among multiple customers. Coming to the unsecured connection, and this is not the case because connections in public cloud are very secure. Then we have limited storage. This is also not the characteristic of public cloud because storage is not limited in public cloud. You can have as much storage as you like. And then we have metered pricing, which is a correct answer because cloud does provide metered pricing as you pay for the resources that you use. And then we have self-service management, which is also correct because cloud provides a self-managed service as you can use the portal to add, change, and remove the resources you want and when you need them. Now let's read question number 113. The question says NSG or network resource group can be applied to what level? Is it subscription level, subnet level, management group level, virtual machine, or NIC level? The correct answer for this question is option B, subnet level, and option D, virtual machine or NIC level. Now let me give you a little bit more detail on NSG. So NSG is majorly used for filtering traffic in and out of the virtual network in Azure. And as I just showed you, NSG can be applied on 2 levels. The first one is subnet. So if you implement NSG at subnet level, all the virtual machines in that subnet will be applied with the rules imposed in the NSG. And then we have the virtual machine or NIC level. And if you apply the NSG at virtual machine or NIC level, the rule will be implemented only for that virtual machine. By the way, if you don't know, NIC means Network Interface Card. Now let's move to question number 114. The question says, what are different level of access tiers for blob data? Select all applicable options. Your options are hot tier, cold tier, archive tier, or permanent tier. The correct answer for this question is option A, hot tier, option B, cold tier, and option C, archive tier. A little bit more explanation on each of this. So you use hot tier in case of frequently accessed data. On the other hand, the cold tier is used when you have infrequently accessed data or lower availability and higher durability. And then the archive tier is used when you access that data very rarely. And with that quick information on access tiers, let's move to question number 115. The question says, what is Azure Policy Initiative? Your options are a collection of policy definitions, collection of Azure Policy definition assignments, or group of Azure Blueprints definition, or group of role-based access control, or RBAC. The correct answer for this question is option A, a collection of policy definitions. Quickly jumping to question number 116, and it says that what is guaranteed in an Azure service level agreement for virtual machine? Is it guaranteeing uptime or feature availability, or does it guarantee bandwidth, or does it guarantee the performance? The correct answer for this question is uptime. So whenever you're talking about Azure Service Level Agreement, you're always talking about uptime of the virtual machines. Now let's move to question number 117, and it says that which statement accurately describes the modern lifecycle policy for Azure services. Your options are given here. The first one is Microsoft provides mainstream support for a service for 5 years, or Microsoft provides a minimum of 12 months notice before ending support for a service. The third option is after the service is made generally available, Microsoft provides for the service for a minimum of 4 years. And the last option is when a service is retired, you can purchase extended support for the service for up to 5 years. The correct answer for this question is option B. Microsoft provides a minimum of 12 months notice before ending support for a service. Now let's jump to question number 118, which is a yes/no kind of question. Now let's read the first statement. It says most Azure services are introduced in private preview before being introduced in public preview and then in general availability. The correct answer for this statement is yes. I've got one more question on private preview, public preview and general availability, so keep watching the video. Then in the second statement, it says that Azure services in public preview can be managed only by using Azure CLI. And the correct answer for this one, of course, is no. And the reason is that you can manage Azure services in public preview not only using Azure CLI, you can also use Azure Bash and all the other options available for any service which is in general availability. Now comes the third statement, and this says the cost of an Azure service in private preview decreases when the service becomes generally available. The correct answer for this one is no. And the reason is the cost of the service remains the same. Now let's take one more yes/no kind of question in question number 119. Let's read the first statement. The statement says with a consumption-based plan, you pay a fixed rate for all the data sent to or from virtual machine hosted in the cloud. The correct answer for this question is no. Then the second statement says with a consumption-based plan, you reduce overall cost by paying only for extra capacity when it is required. The correct answer for this one is yes. And then we have the third statement which says serverless computing is an example of consumption-based plan. The correct answer for this one is yes. Now let's read question number 120. The question says that Azure services in public preview can be managed by using which of the management tool? Your options are Azure Portal and Azure CLI. The correct answer for this question is option A and option B as well. Now friends, you might be thinking that I have selected both the option by mistake, but this is not a mistake. You can actually manage the Azure services in public preview using both Azure Portal and Azure CLI. Now let's do one more yes/no kind of question in question number 121. First, let me give you answers to all the statements and then I will give you a little bit more details on NSG and how you can work with it. So the first statement says that you can associate network security group to a virtual network subnet. And the correct answer for this statement is yes. Moving on with the second statement, this one says that you can associate a network security group to a virtual network. The correct answer for this statement is no. And now let's move to the statement number 3. It says that you can associate a network security group to a network interface. The correct answer for this statement is yes. A very quick info on NSG, you can associate 0 or 1 network security group to each virtual network subnet and network interface in a virtual machine. Now let me take you to Microsoft site where you can read more about network security group and how you can use them to filter out network traffic. So here is the Microsoft documentation on network security group filtration on network traffic. You can read here that you can use Azure Network Security Group to filter network traffic to and from Azure resources in an Azure virtual network. Lot of details are given in this page, how you can filter out the inbound traffic, how you can work with the outbound traffic. So read this page. The link for this page is available in the description box. And friends, besides this documentation, you can also refer question number 113, that is question number 113 of this part 4 only. In that question, I detailed out how you can use network security group and on which level you can apply network security group. So do watch that question. Now let's move to question number 122. You can enable just-in-time virtual machine access by using, your options are Azure Bastion, Azure Firewall, Azure Front Door or Azure Security Center. And the correct answer for this question is option D, Azure Security Center. And here comes little bit more details. It says that just-in-time virtual machine access feature in Azure Security Center allows you to lock down inbound traffic to your Azure virtual machines. This reduces exposure to attacks while providing easy access when you need to connect a virtual machine. And besides that quick info, you can also come to this Microsoft website which talks more about just-in-time access. It's a lengthy document and you can read whenever you have good time to read, and the link for this page is available in the description box. Now let's move to question number 123. The question says a company is using containers for deploying all of its web application. During a security audit, you notice that Microsoft Defender for Cloud is not being used properly to provide misconfigurations related to containers. For which resource can you not use Microsoft Defender for Cloud to secure the containers? Your options are Azure Kubernetes Service, Container Host, Azure Container Registry, or Azure Container Instance. The correct answer for this question is option D, Azure Container Instance. Azure Container Instance does not use Microsoft Defender for Cloud. ACI is a service that allows you to run containers in cloud without using virtual machines. And with that, let's jump to question number 124. It says that you have an Azure environment. You need to create an Azure virtual machine from a tablet that runs on Android operating system. What are three possible solutions? Each correct answer presents a complete solution. And please note that each correct selection is worth 1 point. Your options are use Bash in Azure Cloud Shell, use PowerShell in Azure Cloud Shell. The third option is use the Power Apps portal, use the Security and Compliance Admin Center, or the last option is use the Azure Portal. The three correct solutions for this question are use Bash in Azure Cloud Shell, use PowerShell in Azure Cloud Shell, and of course use Azure Portal, which can be accessed through any browser. And we can see in the question that our user is using a tablet and that is running on Android operating system, and of course that supports browsers. Moving on with question number 125, it says that Azure Site Recovery provides fault tolerance for virtual machine. And the instructions for this question is that you have to review the underlying text, which is this Azure Site Recovery. And if this makes the entire statement correct, then you have to choose no change needed. Otherwise, to make this statement correct, you have to choose one of these three given options. So let's check out the correct answer, which is option B, disaster recovery. Now let me tell you a little bit more about Azure Site Recovery that helps ensure business continuity by keeping business apps and workloads running during outages. Site Recovery replicates workloads running on a physical and virtual machines from a primary site to a secondary location. Now let's jump to question number 126, and this question says an availability zone in Azure has physically separate location across two continents. The instructions given are that you have to review the underlying text, this one, and if this makes the statement correct, select no change needed. Otherwise, you have to select one of these given options. The options given are no change needed, within a single Azure region, within multiple Azure region, within a single Azure data center. The correct answer for this question is option B, within a single Azure region. A quick info on Azure Availability Zone. So Azure Availability Zone is a high availability offering that protects your application and data from data center failure. Availability zones are unique physical locations within an Azure region, and that's exactly what we have chosen as an answer to this question. Now let's move to question number 127 that says a system ability to scale dynamically is called, and the options given are agility, elasticity, or extendability. The correct answer is elasticity. Now let me tell you what exactly it means whenever we say that this system is elastic. So whenever a system is elastic, that means that it can adjust its processing power to match the demand. This means the system can allocate or deallocate resources dynamically. So basically the system can adjust its processing power based on the demand. If the demand goes up, the processing power follows and it also goes up. And similar happen whenever the demand comes down, the processing power also comes down. Moving on with question number 128, it says horizontal scaling and vertical scaling are two types of scaling in Azure. You have to tell whether it's a true or a false statement. The correct answer is that this is definitely a true statement. Now let me tell you a little bit more on horizontal scaling and vertical scaling. So keep in mind, whenever we are talking about auto scale, it means that we can always scale horizontally, which means an increase, which is sometimes also called scale out, or decrease, which is also called scale in number of virtual machine instances. So what exactly is horizontal scaling? So horizontal scaling is more flexible in cloud situation as it allows you to run potentially thousands of virtual machines to handle the load. On the other hand, the vertical scaling is different. It keeps the same number of virtual machine but makes the virtual machine more, or also called scale up, or less, also called scale down, powerful. In very simple words, horizontal scaling means that you can increase or decrease the virtual machine to match the demand. And in contrast, in vertical scaling, we do not increase or decrease the virtual machine itself. However, we increase or decrease the processing power of the available virtual machine. I hope I'm able to give you a quick introduction what are the differences between horizontal scaling and vertical scaling. So now let's move on to question number 129. And the question says, which of the following is correct life cycle of Azure services? So is it like private preview, then public preview, and then generally available? Or the second option is dev preview or development preview, and then public preview, and then generally available? The correct answer for this question is option 1, which means that all the Azure services first come in private preview, and then they come in public preview, and then they are generally available. Now let's move to question number 130. The question says that you can create group policies in Azure Active Directory. You have to tell a true or a false statement. The correct answer, it is a true statement. Moving on with question number 131, it says that you can join Windows 10 devices to Azure Active Directory, and this one is a true statement. And then we have question number 132, which says that you can join Android devices to Azure Active Directory, and this one is a false statement. Now let's check out question number 133. The question says that which resources can be used as a source for a network security group inbound security rule. Your options are application security groups only, IP address only, service tags only, or IP addresses, service tags, and application security groups. And the correct answer for this one is, of course, option D. And now let's jump to question number 134. And the question says that you have an Azure subscription named subscription 1. You sign into Azure Portal and create a resource group named RG1. Now from the Azure documentation, you have the following command that creates a virtual machine named VM1. And this is the command. You can see this command. And further it says that you need to create VM1 in subscription 1 by using the command. The solution given is that from the Azure Portal, launch Azure Cloud Shell and select bash. Run the command in the Cloud Shell. So basically you have to run this command in Azure Cloud Shell. So the question is asking whether this solution meets the goal. And the correct answer for this question is yes. Now let me show you one more variation of the same question. And that's presented in question number 135. The question is exactly the same. However, this time the solution given is that from a computer that runs on Windows 10, install Azure CLI, and then from the command prompt, sign into Azure and run the command. Does this meet the goal? And friends, as per my understanding, this is a correct solution. And the reason is that I think that Windows 10 or Azure CLI here are a bit of a distraction, and they both are redundant in this question. Because the main point is that you sign into the Azure Portal and then run the command from the Azure Portal. And of course, this is quite possible to run this command from the Azure Portal. However, I understand that you might be seeing other variation of this question on various other sites. So I would be really happy to discuss this question. So please do share your thoughts on this question in the comment section, and then we can have a discussion further on this question. So those were our collection of 135 questions on AZ-900. And friends, for a free PDF file containing all the 135 questions with answers discussed in this video, you have to tell me the correct answer for the question number 27, 54, 81, 108 and 135. You will get all the answers to all these 5 questions in this video itself. Please do not miss to watch our previous video with 191 question on AZ-900. And friends, at Tech Blackboard, we are eagerly waiting for your feedback and comments as they give us the opportunity to understand your likes and dislikes. And before ending the video, I would like to thank you all for spending your valuable time with us. And if our video has contributed in your learning, please make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Till we meet again in our next video, stay fit, keep learning, and thanks for watching. If this video has added any value in your learning, a like and subscribe is highly appreciated. Share this video in your family and friends to spread and expand their learning. Your comments and feedback give me a chance to interact with you, and I look forward for them. We will meet again in our next video. Till then, stay fit, keep learning, and thanks for watching.